brings it up. The Penguins were changing. So able to come out relatively easy. It's Keith Primo with the first. Primo cuts the inside, scores! There it is! Keith Primo! The much maligned center of the Philadelphia Flyers wins this game in the fifth overtime.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 237, brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com. The Flyers have reached the 10-game mark with a record of 3-6-1 after the shocking 2-0 shutout. I don't think anybody saw that coming. The Flyers have not won in Beantown since, I believe it was 2011, and They have not shut out the Bruins since 2006, I believe. So this actually comes off on the heels of really shabby play, and we're going to talk about some of the games that went down, but we're going to also take a broader look as well at some of the numbers and some of the transactions since we last spoke to you, because a lot is going on. But before we get too deep into that, the great Dan Silver cannot join us tonight because he has a work assignment. But of course, always to my left, Chef B, what's on your mind tonight?
Hey, imagine what a little structure can do for your team, huh? Look at what happened. So I look forward to talking about this. This should be an interesting, but I think we can figure out what happened. People are saying this took them by surprise, but this is, hey, we saw this team. This was a little bit of the team we saw last year. So I hope they're back to the standard, let's just say. All right? Can't wait to get this started.
Yeah, I mean, I would make a counterpoint that this looks like the team from 2 years ago, where the only way they could beat teams that were clearly better than them was to lock it down, block the middle of the ice, block a million shots, and do what they did. Of course, and without getting into it, maybe we should get into it. One of the things I noticed last night, which would not have happened a couple years ago, would be Tyson Foerster being a split second earlier on his release for the only goal, 5-on-5 goal in the entire game, because it was Farabee's late empty netter, which made it 2-0. So that was definitely a good thing. But a lot of other aspects of how they played were more kind of locked down. Gee, we can't generate offense, but let's do this.
Well, yeah, yes. And I will contend to say, Korpisalo played very good. He had those two huge saves very on in the game. And
Brink had a couple,
one. Yeah. Well, I think one was on the Mitchkoff line and one was on the Farabee line with Brink and Lawton. He made, a 10-bell save on Brink there. It looked like it was an empty net for him. So, it's not like their effort wasn't there, like there was an offensive effort. It disappeared in the third period, the offensive effort. I think with like 4 minutes left, I think there was only 3 shots on goal for either team altogether. So, but overall, they played the game they needed to play going in there. They got some offense. I really thought who had a really good game. I thought Farabee had a really good game. I thought, what do you call it? Obviously, Brink, too. I think they did good. Lawton was pretty good.
Sanheim.
You know who was my
fantastic?
Sanheim
game.
was amazing, and
Ristolainen,
so
Andrae,
Ristolainen, and you can't Urson. You can't take away from Urson.
Well,
But
yeah,
the one thing I mean, you can't take that away from him. You get a shutout, you deserve the high honors. But Noah Cates appeared to be the one he was before. I mean, he was really shut down. He was 4 for 6. He won a couple faceoffs when they were short. They were shorthanded, and one of them big faceoff win.
4 for 6 on faceoff.
4 for 6 on faceoffs. Yeah, a big faceoff win when they were shorthanded by 2 guys. When they killed that off, you thought, oh, okay, maybe they're on tonight. And one of those big faceoff wins was on there. So, a couple bad penalties, but they were excellent on the penalty kill. I can't complain about that.
2-man. Yeah.
And but also power play was a little bit disheveled still. I mean, it's not where I want it to be. But overall, I mean, I had to be happy with the effort. At least the effort was there this time. Whereas Montreal, it seems like it was like they were, geez, you didn't know. The lines didn't seem like they belonged to anybody or each other at all. But it looks like they got the lines figured out, and they're meshing and gelling now. So I'm looking forward to the next game. So tomorrow night, which should be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they went into the Wild game, which we'll talk about a little bit later, really hurting, needing a victory, and ended up being a Wild game. Like I said, we'll get into that, and then it really set expectations for a better game against Montreal, and then they played more or less what we thought they would in terms of representing how they've been so far. So it's been frustrating, but I want to get into some numbers that were like 10 games in. But before we do that, just a reminder that we're also brought to you by Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. 40 years of the best cheesesteaks and hoagies and fries in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. We know you want some. So if you're down there, check them out at 400 South Street. If you live down there, Uber Eats, DoorDash, and get that food right to your door. Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. Let's get into some numbers here. The Flyers are still a minus team in terms of goals scored against, or minus 11. Looking at some other things, their power play is better right now. I think it's like 12th in the league, 22%. They're 5th in the league in PK. I think it's right above, a tick above 87%. So the problem has been 5-on-5. And if you look at it, and you look at some of the leading scorers, like the TK is 5 goals, 5 assists for 10 points. Michkov is 4-5 for 9 points. Couturier is 3-3 for 6. Tippett still only 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. Sanheim is in there with 3-2 for 5 points. Morgan Frost, no goals, 5 assists. And this kind of gets us where I'm at here. If you look at the young core with guys like Farabee, Forster, Tippett, these are 3 wingers right here, young wingers, okay? And Forster's coming up on a UFA year. And of course, Morgan Frost doing his toilet seat thing. That to me, their 5-on-5 play has, to me, been one of the bigger indictments of what they've been and why they're 3-6-1 and not the other way around.
Yeah, you definitely got to get more contribution from the younger kids. I mean, Morgan Frost has been almost non-existent. I mean, bad giveaways. I think he had 2 bad giveaways last night. I mean, Farabee's been up and down. I want him to stabilize a little bit better. I want him to take last night's game and turn it into a positive and play forward and do it. Tippett been non-existent. I mean, JJ gets you all hyped up when you're listening to the game. Hey, here he goes. He's turning on the burners. And all of a sudden, he just like, all right, he stops and there's nobody with him, or the play just fizzled out. I mean, it's great you can get up the ice fast, but you got to be able to know what to do with the puck when you have it. And he seems to have forgotten, or the confidence isn't there.
Had a sink.
Brink, yeah, what's that? Yeah, it's missing. So Brink, I liked his game last night. He seemed like it's funny. You can tell the game in the first like 2 shifts of each line. But he was up on his skates. He seemed like he was. They were always saying his name. Oh, he's pestered by Brink or this. And Brink seemed to be like, all right, I'm not. I hate sitting out. And he did. He sat out the last 3 games. It was healthy scratching. I take it he didn't like it, and it sounded like he didn't like it, so he's back in there, and he made sure that he was going to be noticed, and he was. I just think you need more. You need more from Tippett. Farabee too. Yeah, and Forrester and you know what? A little disappointing. He got hit in the boys last night, Drysdale, but he's been a little MIA too. He had a little bit of a better game the other day. His best game was probably against the Wild, but he got hit in the boys last night. But maybe that was the wake up call he needs, because he seemed like he had a little pep in his step after that. But otherwise, the younger guys are the ones that are letting this team slide a little bit.
I think you can make that case. I mean, Couturier is what he is, and we'll get to him in a second. But yeah, I think that Drysdale, I just have to warn people. I've had a lot of comments about what Drysdale is. When Tortorella uses a term like rebuilt to refer to a player, that means they're stripping him down, and they want him to make simple plays first and build on some things. Use his speed, whatever comes instinctive. I could agree with an assessment. He's not the most instinctive hockey player, but I also think that with all the things he has going through his mind, he's probably overthinking too much and not letting his natural ability take over, because he's going through that process. That's why I said last show, give him like 60 games.
Yeah.
Let's see where we're at late in February, March, and let's see. Look, they have a fairly good track record with putting these guys in a better position. Sanheim's been a better player since Bradshaw was coach. Cam York seems to have developed. Risto has been better. So I would give them a positive grade on how they're coaching their defensemen up. So let's not pass judgment too quickly on a 22-year-old defenseman who missed a lot of time, drafted in a COVID year. Yeah, Chef, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with any of that. What I want to see, though, is the simple plays. I think as of lately, it seems like they're hanging on to the puck a little bit too long, and you're missing that first pass out. I think they're, like you said, overthinking it. They're looking for too many options and just taking the option that's in front of them. I just want them to do the simple things. And like you said, once they get down those simple things, the other stuff will just come naturally, I think. But I just want to see him strip it down a little bit even more and go with his instinct, and not necessarily try to overthink every play on every shift.
Well, it's hard to disagree with that. Let's get into the goaltending. They recently promoted Aleksei with the special spelling, Aleksei. Take that other spelling of Aleksei Kolosov, or Aleksei's first name, out of your mind. It's Alec and SEI, really, basically. So we'll get into his game, but the Flyers going into last night had league worst goaltending, and you could talk about save percentages and things like that. I'm looking at something on Money Puck I think it might be a better measure of just how bad the Flyers have been. Now, this includes even last night. The worst goals saved above expectation in the league, if I'm reading this chart right, is Alexander Georgiev of Colorado. And this is not in the notes. I just dug this one up. And he is at minus 10.2. That means he's given up 10 goals more than you would expect. Whoever comes up with these, estimations. In third place, after Connor Ingram from Utah, giving up 5.1 more goals, so he's a minus 5.1, is Ivan Fedotov. And even at number 11, even after last night, from what I gather, this I think this has been updated. Samuel Ursan is still giving up 2.8 goals more than expected. In other words, minus 2.8 goals. So really, you're getting a bad goal virtually every game. And some of that is the scrambling defense, the lack of smooth transition out, which you're getting bad clears, and a lot of that could be that some of these forwards that we were just chastising are leaving the zone too early because they're not getting their goals and they're cheating out of the zone. You see how it all falls apart, because I swear hockey is the ultimate team game. So one thing feeds off the other. It's never one thing usually, but within the goaltending, if you don't have that faith in your goalie, then it really can capsize pretty fast. So we're going to have to take a look at this again, maybe in about 15 games when we're around at the quarter mark. So as a result of this, now let's get into some of the moves the Flyers made. The Flyers brought up Aleksei Kolosov. We discussed that we figured this could happen because of the so-called understanding, quote unquote, between the agent, Dan Milstein, for Aleksei Kolosov and the Flyers, or else, he goes back to Dynamo Minsk. But also with that, Cam York got hurt. I don't know if it's a shoulder concussion or whatever it is. So they bring up Emil Andrae with him. So after Zamula, who's been playing horrible, we talked about that. Andrae gets in the lineup. Last couple games, he's been pretty good. Why don't we talk about, though, Aleksei Kolosov's debut versus Montreal in a game that was very disappointing from a team perspective. Kolosov probably one bad goal, and this had everybody on the team and Tortorella talking about how they're disjointed and they're not playing as five-man units.
Yeah. Well, right off the bat, when you see Kolosov, you see the athleticism that was scouted. It was scouted. You could see it right away. He moves better than Fedotov. He's not as big, but he's quicker. It looks like he's quicker.
No one's as big as Fedotov.
Yeah, nobody is. There's a couple players, a couple goalies you put together, they're still not as big as Fedotov. But I think it's just going to be, for him, it's everything. It's everything you were warned about with goalies. When they come over from other leagues and I know there'll be people out there that say, oh, well, they have some NHL size rings in KHL. It's a different game, totally different game than from overseas. So when you're coming in, your angles are off, the pace is off, so your stance is off. I mean, for God's sakes, you saw at one point, I think it was, somebody pointed it out, I forget what game it was. It might have been the Saturday game. Was that Fedotov on Saturday?
I believe
whatever.
Montreal, yeah. So I believe.
No, yes. Kolosov was Montreal, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So, but Fedotov was still looking at his feet and making sure his positioning was still good. It's situational awareness. I know that these guys and I'm not here. I know this is going to be growing pains with both of them. And Ursan, I want more out of Ursan. I want him to take this game and build on it. But with our two KHL goalies, let's just say, I give them a little bit more leeway. I got to see more. It's you got everybody passing judgment on 3 games. 3 games that you've seen with these guys so far. And I know we saw a little bit of Fedotov last year, but it's at the end of the season,
Last year, that didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't even, I throw that away. That's not even a factor. So that's now fine. I look at everything and
he had all off season though, man. It's just I mean, he just looked like Cal Peterson all over again.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with him. Now, I agree. I mean, if there wasn't the quote understanding, none of this would be happening. There is no way in hell a guy as green as Kolosov would be playing for the Flyers and currently occupying a roster spot. It just wouldn't happen. and they'd be more patient with Fedotov. It just happens to be a unique situation where they're letting a player and his agent dictate to them to some degree, and the Flyers have a certain amount of desperation on top of it.
Yeah.
And you add the two together, and here we are with a 3 goalie situation and a 3-6-1 team after 10 games.
You know what I want to point out? Remember, I said I expected them to score a little bit more this year. I expected them to give a little bit more goals up this year because of the goalie situation. Because you don't at this point you're going to find out how much Sealer and
Walker,
Sealer and Walker. You're gonna find out how much that pairing, how steady that pairing was, and that's gone. Carter Hart actually stole you some games early on too and gave you stability. That's gone. All right, Urson's got to stand up, be the man now. All right. Okay, yeah, you got Mitch Goff and you got some guys that should take that next step and score more. But get used to the fact that the game against the Wild is probably going to be more of a standard. You're going to have higher shootout games like this, and you're going to have goalies that are learning on the fly and probably not the right way because they're not. This is the biggest problem. I think everybody's missing the big picture. We always talked about how players need to cook in the AHL a little bit and learn. We sent Jett Luchanko, who we haven't even talked about yet. He went back. You got Bonk, you got Barkey, you got several other players down there learning how to play right and learning the missing their mistakes. But here we're taking our goalies and we're taking them right out of there, throwing them right into the mix, and they're not learning the proper way now. So I'm a little perturbed by that.
Well, wait a minute. It's a little different. I mean, Fedotov is 27, soon to be 28, and you have Kolosov, who has played in the KHL against men, and he's 22. Now, it's true that goaltenders tend to really reach their peak at 24 and 25, and that's great. I mean, that's when Sorokin and Shesterkin came over for the Islanders and the Rangers, respectively. But still, I wouldn't compare that to Luchanko, Bonk, and Barkey, who clearly at 18 and 19 don't belong in the league. I mean, you can make the case that Luchanko probably could have survived if they let him play in the AHL at that age. Of course, they wouldn't. There's a rule against that. Mm-hmm. And you could make the case that maybe Bonk would be better off in the AHL. But other than that, no, I just don't think there's a parallel there. I'm not trying to be overly critical of your analysis, but I think it's a little off track in that case.
I just think that you're taking. All right, I'll give you Fedotov, but you're talking. Sorokin, when did he come over? 25, 26. That's 4 years.
He was 24. He was 24. I think he was.
No, it's still it's 2 years more seasoning, is what I'm saying of development in the third best league in the world, right? So that's all I have to say. I just think it's being rushed a little bit. He should have had a little more seasoning. I don't know. I don't want to lose the goalie. I understand the situation, how unique it is, but still at the same time, then I would say the critiques about the players being thrust into a situation that's a little bit over their head right now. That's my opinion. I'm giving them extra leeway in my assessment because of that. Let's just say that I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, but it's the player himself through his agent in Kolosov's case that's pushing that. They are pushing that envelope. He wants to be here.
I totally agree. I'm not blaming I just want to make sure I'm not blaming the Flyers for this. I'm blaming if he falls flat on his face, it's because it's his fault, not because of the Flyers that's all.
Yeah, the Flyers get a little blame for getting a little pushed around a little bit. I think they may be sensitive to what happened with Gauthier, and I would not be surprised if they were a little more lax than they would care to be because of that situation, but I could be totally wrong. Time will tell. Now, another player who Jett Luchanko, it was sent back because he wasn't playing and the Flyers were playing horribly. And so this classic case of why the player couldn't be here. Number one, he was just kind of surviving, holding his own. He wasn't really thriving out there. He was flashing his speed and doing what he can do well. And that's fine. But beyond that, when the team started playing poorly and he couldn't make a difference, you didn't want to put this 18-year-old kid, 6 or 7 weeks after his 18th birthday in a position of being some kind of savior or something like that. That's why Tortorella, even with the dearth he has at center, held him out. And then at that point, Briere seemingly stepped in and said, look, enough of this. Let's not force feed a kid in. And that's something Tortorella said before the season. We're not going to force feed a kid in a situation out of need. So being consistent with that, he goes back to Guelph. There was a lot of people talking about, well, Guelph is not a very good team, but he should get traded at some point in a better situation. A lot of people were hoping it will be London because, he would have some relationships that could be fruitful for the future of the Flyers. But myself, I think Bonka's going to be a pretty good player. Barkey, I'm not sure is an NHL player. He's a guy you want to root for, but so that's Luchanko.
Well, for Luchanko too,
you
want him to go back down. You want him to experience the junior championships. You want him to experience the OHL playoffs. If he can get there, you want him to get that, because what does this do? It builds. This is development. It builds adversity. It builds character. It shows you what kind of player you have when you're putting him in these high-end situations, and you can see if the guy's going to flourish or not. But more importantly, even if he doesn't flourish, even if his team lose, they get knocked out or whatever, or Canada doesn't win, guess what? You got to lose to learn how to win, and losing is part of the game. So,
well, I think more important than losing, I think he needs to get with a skills coach, and he'll probably have those opportunities when he, while at juniors. I mean, his coach is Corey Stillman right now, is a really good NHL player who got a lot out of his talent. So that's a good situation in and of itself. But I would say he should get with a skills coach, a lot like Claude Giroux did at some point of his career. So I think he's not related to Shane Malloy, but his name's Malloy, and his name escapes me. But he's an actual skills coach for Claude Giroux, and kind of gave G a kind of a renaissance for his career. Pat Malloy, I think it is. So that's what the Flyers, I think a lot of the wingers they have need shooting and skills coaches to take them to another level. Although, like I said earlier about the Forster goal last night, it was a split second earlier. Maybe that, I'm sure it's something he's been working on over, in the off season. So we'll see what happens. I look forward to seeing Luchanko if he can make the WJC squad. I have to think he'd be a real favorite, because you want some guys. He's got that speed they want. He's got the strength most of those kids don't have at that age, especially at his size. And also, he's a two-way guy, because you need players like that to put a team together that can go through a championship run in that tournament. So we'll see how that works out for him, and we wish him all the best. He's better than, so far better, and has a higher ceiling than I thought he did. That's for sure. So
you're right.
The defense,
Pat Malloy is a skills coach.
Okay. Yeah.
I looked it up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get him, I get him right once in a while. So, it's rare, but so 9 points in 10 games. Matvei Michkov has been pretty much as promised, and he's still learning. His shifts are long. He sometimes doesn't look like he knows what to do on defensive end, but he's trying, and he's a real competitor. And the thing about him that jumps out is, like last night, he's behind the net, and he throws his backhand pass to TK, who's on his backhand, and he wasn't ready for, in the future, he'll be ready for it, and it'll generate a chance.
Yeah, I was having an argument, a friend of mine was down at the game, and he was, ironically, his name is Dan as well, but it's a different Dan. So, but he was down at the game, and he said he was looking for somebody that's a leader. I'm not seeing anything extra. I'm like, watch him away from the play. And I said, you're going to see it 2 or 3 times, at least during a game, where his, I'll quote Dan Silver here, his mind is like a supercomputer. I mean, a lot of other players wouldn't even thought to make that pass. And here he's making it, and he's hitting TK, and TK's like, I said, once you get used to playing, once the other guys, and I think that's going to be the hardest adjustment. Is not going to be for you don't want him to stop playing at his speed. You want like TK and Coots or whoever's going to play with him sit there and go, look, you got to be ready for all this. This guy is thinking 3 steps ahead of you. And when he's on the left wing, he's already thinking, I'm going to go around the front. You get to I'm going to go around the side or around behind the net or whatever. And you got to be ready for that pass because he's going to set you up. And we had this huge argument about Mitch Golf, and I said, he's 19. He's only going to get better. And at that point, he's a point a player a game right now. This is, for a 19-year-old, man, it's a real hell of a start.
Yeah, I think so. So wrapping up the Montreal game, it really just it was drudgery watching it. And then the Flyers made the usual losers lose late rally. Sanheim had a really good game. Kolosov got beat on a short side shot that he should not get beat out. But even if it's Cole Caulfield, you shouldn't do it. Caulfield's looking like a 40-goal scorer this year. And so the game before that, and we were doing this Godfather 2 style tonight, the Flyers won 7-5 in a wild affair. Coots and TK both had 5 points. Coots with the hat trick, and he got 500. He reached the 500-point level. So that was an exciting game. And Michkov had 1 goal, a great goal. He circles out, almost Forsbergian, if I could use such a term, and finding a little crease there, a little opening, shooting it where the goalie couldn't see it. I think it was off of one post and then the other and in the net. Something, just a laser shot. And it wasn't that hard. It's the precision. And we could talk about how a lot of these young kids and the wingers in general have zero accuracy. That's another frustrating thing. But the Flyers won this game. It was a fun game. And for one night, even though it was sloppy, like I said, a win is a win. And I quoted old Billy Cunningham saying from like 1970 or 71 in this little book of like short stories when I was like 10 years old. So it must have been 1970. It could have been 1971. So because I was 10-70. So offense or defense, a win is a win. I always remind myself of that because, you can lose and be valiant. Sometimes, you just need to win. And at that point, they needed it. And it was a fun game. No doubt about that.
Yeah, I loved it. And I was happy. You know what we haven't talked about? I guess Sealer coming back. I think Sealer really starting to settle down these guys, and it's a bonus too when you get goals from Sealer and Ristolainen. It's always a bonus. They're the big guys throwing their weight around and setting the tone for the game. That's what you're hoping, and then when you can get goals from those guys too, and then the top line just goes crazy and with points and stuff like that. So, but it was a very entertaining game, and if you were watching that game, you were at that game, you got your money's worth. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that was the game. That was the first game all year where Sean Couturier, obviously a 5-point night and a hat trick, looked us to be the player that he was in the first part of last year, which we were all kind of surprised last year. And we were concerned that he was being overplayed, which he was, and he got hurt. He wore down. Tortorella, it's so predictable. But, I mean, the captain obvious situation, and it played out as soon as he became captain. We don't have to go through what Tortorella did. But, hey, look, his plays dipped a little since then. But, again, he's defensively responsible. He's still their best center at the end of the day. Luchanko was going to make it. Frost, we talked about earlier, is I think he's in his last year with the team. I think we're done with this nonsense. Yeah. I think I was going back and forth with a guy who covers the league. I'll put it that way. And he talks to a lot of executives about Frost being somewhat of a conundrum. And he thinks that the Flyers are kind of like that, shrugging their shoulders with this guy, and he just doesn't have the determination And when he gets into situations where he has to make consistent contact, when they play him rough, he kind of shies away. And that seems to be a consensus, which really hurts his value. And we're so deep into this. We're in year number 8 post-draft. I think what we're seeing right now, unless he can just turn the page and get with a team that has a different system where it's more of an emphasis on flow and all that. The Flyers are supposed to be. That's what the Flyers were last year. But maybe it just needs to change the scenery. I think it's not going to happen here. I'm ready to stake that claim after 10 games and into this point,
Tear the Band-Aid off. That's what I say. It's a shame when you see a player who obviously has skill. If I could take his skill and transfer it to somebody's work ethic like Noah Cates or Scott Lawton, who's always hustling every shift, or Hathaway, all three of them, they are like you. They're running around like crazy. They're tired after every shift. They got to be burnt out after every shift. The way they hustle out there. If I could just transfer that over, and trust me, I wasn't the guy with skill in any sport, except maybe baseball, but I didn't have that skill. But I'll be damned if I didn't work hard. Nobody was going to outwork me. I was the Rudy Rudiger of my CYO or local team. I was a guy, hey, you got to work as hard as Chef here. Well, it wasn't Chef then, it was meat. But, so that's just the way it was. I mean, but I hate seeing people wasting talent there. And he's getting lost in too many games. Half the time I got to look and wait, did they scratch him or did he get benched? No, he didn't get scratched or benched. It's just he's not involved in the play. He shies away. And I don't understand it.
I think it's hard to say it's hustle or a lack of hustle. Maybe it is. I don't feel like he's dogging. He's not Pierre-Luc Dubois out there. I don't see that. I just think when the going gets tough, he doesn't get going. I'll put it that way.
Well, look, too, he scores, like he came on scoring second half of last year, right? Again, when it didn't mean anything anymore. That's when the games are meaningless or not as,
It's like the Montreal game. They lost that game. It deserved to lose that game. It was 4-1, and it ended up 4-3. And to me, you can make a parallel between that and how Morgan Frost plays. He always has a better second half when the pressure isn't on. And I mean, even then, he's not great. He has some moments where, that's good. Yeah, that's kind of what we expected. But can we do this for 70 games at least? 60 games? No.
40? 40?
Yeah,
41? I'll take half a season.
Now, I feel like Dr. Evil is saying to his son, Scott, can it be an evil doctor? You know what I mean? It's like anything. Can we just get a little bit with Morgan Frost? Yeah. No, I think I'm slamming the door. It's shut. I'm looking forward to him playing elsewhere. The Flyers have to get serious about what's going on at center ice because what are the choices? Lawton's not a great center. Paling is a fourth line center. Cates is more or less a fourth line center. So what do they have now? They have a guy who's more like a 2C in Couturier on his best nights, probably more like a 3C on a good team. Frost, who has the talent of a 2C and just wouldn't even be in the lineup otherwise because he doesn't check well enough. And as you can see, it's the worst position. I'm glad they're pecking away at it a little bit with Luchanko, but they need to score, whether it's a Band-Aid player or something. If they went offense, it seems obvious to me, despite of his speed, the lack of hockey sense and things like that with Tippett and the lack of speed and ability to get to the right areas with Forster a lot of times and Farabee, I don't know what's with him, but they all need centers that help them. Okay. TK can do a lot on his own because he creates a lot of his own shots. But you do a give and go with TK. I can guarantee you he's going to get a primo chance, especially since his play picked up, after that little talking to he got from Briere a couple of years ago. So I think, so this is the team we have right now. I don't know if they're going to solve this 5-on-5 problem though, because this whole disconnectedness, and this is what I mentioned earlier about how they don't come up as 5-man units and the so-called disconnectedness that they'd have. And I think even Chuck Fletcher mentioned that when does he know a team is doing well? Is if you do a freeze frame on your team in the zone at any point, you should be able to see all 5 guys, barring a line change or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's the connectedness of a team that's in sync. And that's what a Tortorella team does. They attack, they come in waves. There's a lot of back pressure. It's a 5-man unit. The defensemen, especially if they have speed and some offensive puck moving ability, they're not shy. They move the puck. We saw it with Sean Walker. We're seeing that this year with Sanheim. We're seeing it occasionally from Drysdale and in Cam York. And that's why they want the mobile guys. But it just hasn't been together. Last night, they kind of played like they did, in my opinion, like they did a couple of years ago. We'll see how it goes. Sometimes you get one victory and you break the streak and you kind of come back to, what worked for you last year instead of 2 years ago. I don't know.
Now, I got an interesting question for you.
Yes.
So, because you'd mentioned the center issue, and if you get rid of, whatever Frost or even Paling too, and you make the room, and you go out there, and let's just say next year Luchanko's maybe not maybe he's a second, maybe he evolves into a second line center, and he's not the number one, and you still get a number one, or you sign somebody, or there's 1, 2, or 3. Are you fine with
next year,
or whatever down the line?
Oh,
are you
okay,
fine
yeah.
because I'm saying this because of Coots' contract? Are you fine with Coots being a third line center and being captain of this team? I'm asking this because I'm trying to remember Keith Primo when he was captain. I know he's center, but was he a third or second line? He wasn't a first line center at that time. Was he second or third line and still the captain? And I know there's a dollar value is not the same. I'm not talking about that.
No, that doesn't matter. No, Couture, Keith Primo was at least a second line center on that team. I don't remember all the combinations.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I want to say he's a third line center. Yeah,
I know he had that 30 goal season, but after that, it was more about
2001.
Yeah, his two-way play was more about that. Just think about 2004 when they had a better overall team in terms of how far they went. Yeah. Although the players themselves think that 2000 team should have gone and should have beaten the Devils. But the 2014 that lost to Tampa actually came closer. And so
it just I think that everybody gets wrapped up in dollars and how expensive players have to play like first line or whatever. I get all that, but I think it doesn't. If reality comes down to it, and you could figure out a way to get your first and second line centers in here, I don't think people would be too upset if Coots was that third center, that shutdown option that you have when you need it. But I don't know.
Let me answer your question. I think optimally, I would say that he should move on from the player. He doesn't want to move, so that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. If they really hit the skids, and Couturier wanted a chance to win a cup, and he could be like basically a Sammy Paulson for some team, then maybe a scenario like that could unfold.
Yeah,
but I don't. There have been a fair number of teams that had players that had a certain status. They declined, but they had the captaincy. Well, all that does, though, that takes the pressure off of some of the higher profile guys. So
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
that's not a bad situation.
Okay.
I have mixed feelings about how important the captaincy is. It's not nothing because they talk about it a lot. It could be overrated, sure, fine, but I do believe that there's something there, and the main thing is they can't worry about that. They just have to improve their position. They should be willing, like I said last week, to move a winger, some combination of players. We talked last week about Scott Lawton, who may have more value if he's playing well as we go to the trade deadline, and see what happens. Because if you're counting on guys like Cates and Lawton who are probably better off at the wing, and Paling, who just can't generate offense. You're in a pit. And you won't be able to help your wingers get out of slumps. I mean, look at even a winger like Michkov is helping his other line mates because of the presence and the way the other teams have to game plan for him, and it creates space, it creates openings. And Couturier is still very good around the net. He has good hands around the net, and the Flyers have a dearth of players who go to the net. And when Couturier, is feeling bold and gets there, then certainly. Then that's a good situation. But yeah, I'd say it's the outstanding move that they need to make is to do something about the center ice position. And I don't know if they even get a Band-Aid this year. They're just going to have to live with it unless a situation presents itself where someone is willing to pay the freight for Risto, or was to have a defensive injury going into the playoffs. Who knows? It's really hard to say. That's the situation with the centers. If somebody wanted Risto, then fine. That might be a situation where they might let go of a young center if they have an excess. But it's really the wingers or defensemen that are going to get the Flyers a center right now, or of course one of their first-round draft picks. But I keep looking at Buffalo. I see all those kids. And a couple of those kids are going to play center. And
it's a log jam there.
A real log jam. They're not going to let go of Benson. They really like Osland, who's probably more of a third line guy, and Yuri Kulich, who could end up being more of a winger, but he can play center. And there's just something there.
What about Anaheim? Doesn't Anaheim have a lot of guys logged up, like jammed up at center too?
Yeah, that depends. Yeah, that depends if you think that Gauthier could be a center. Of course, they're not going to trade Gauthier, but they're not letting go of Mason McTavish. The guy who might be on the block is, what's his name? Trevor Zegras. And, I mean, they're trying to work it out with him. Trevor Zegras is a better version of Frost, but he's still a frustrating player. He's playing for a coach in Cronin who's kind of similar to Torts. And he's really tough on the guys. I mean, he had Gauthier on a fourth line the other night. Then he moved him back. Yeah, but Zegras right now, he's 23. And he's on the last year. No, he's got 1 year after this one at 5.75. And then he's an RFA in the 26-27 season. So Trevor Zegras is, he's coming out of the gate so far this year with 1 goal, 1 assist in 9 games. He's really fallen off a cliff in terms of his standing in the league, but so is Morgan Frost. Frost has a better contract situation because he's an RFA next year, and he's making whatever, 2.75 or whatever it is. I got to check Puckpedia here, but if the Flyers felt that Zegras is viable, I don't know. I heard from a source they wanted him last year, and now I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good source, yeah. Morgan Frost is 2.1, and then he's an RFA, arbitration eligible, and he would get slaughtered if he went to arbitration because he's really, the toilet seat thing is going to kill him. So, yeah. So the Flyers play tomorrow night versus St. Louis. And as we look forward to the schedule, they play the Bruins again in one of those wonderful matinees where the Flyers usually get creamed, and the Bruins are going to get some revenge. And then they're in Carolina. They're in Tampa on the 7th of November. And a certain political situation will hopefully be over by then because we're all kind of tired from that. Yeah. But in between those 2 games, between Carolina and Tampa, both on the road, of course, we're going to have a collaborative effort with another podcast. And I want to confirm it before I make a commitment and put other guys out who may or may not be able to make it. I think we covered a lot of the things we wanted to before we end the show. And yeah, I did want to mention one more thing before we go. It was an interesting article. Sergei Zubov, who I believe is a Hall of Fame defenseman. If he's not, it's criminal. He's really great. Played for Dallas, won a cup. I think he won a cup with the Rangers in '94. I could be wrong, but I know he won in Dallas in '99. I'm pretty sure about that. He is a coach, and he was talking about, I think he's with Sochi. He was talking about Matvei Michkov and Demidov and some of the differences between them. And he says the one thing he'll say about Michkov is he is so determined to be successful that it really made an impression on him. And he's going to only get stronger and better. It's like there's no way this guy fails. And Demidov has some different things he's got to change, but they're very comparable talents. But I thought it was a really good article. And maybe I'll link to that because it was posted, might have been Hockey News Hub or somebody, but I'll link to that in the show notes and you'll find that interesting. So if you say you're on Apple, where we have our podcast and it gives you notes about what we talk about tonight. You'll see Zubov on MM, and that's Matvei Michkov, and Demidov, and I'll put the link in there. So you'll check that out. I think you'll find it's not a real long article, and of course it's a translation, so there's always something a little bit lost there.
Well,
so
very good memory, because he won the cup in '94 with the Rangers and '99 with Dallas, and then he made the KHL All-Star team after he retired from the NHL and played in KHL. So there you go. So,
he's one of my favorites. I think he was
great
like
player. I love that Dallas team, man.
10. Yeah, he was right-handed defenseman. He was just a smart player. And boy, every team could use a Sergei Zubov. I'll give you that much. So, Chef, I'm going to give you the last word. Now, I've been hogging the mic there. Yeah.
Nah, no worries. I just think that, hey, it's a little too early to find out where this team's going to land. I still think this is going to be a team that's going to be in a decent amount of games. Maybe make it meaningful towards the end there, but and fall off short again. And I just think they're almost there. They need to make a couple of minor tweaks and adjustments. But here's the thing. And if you're looking for fun, and I think they're going to be a fun, exciting hockey team, you'll at least get to enjoy the games. They may not win a lot of them, but there are definitely going to be an entertaining team to watch. So, and if you want to argue with me about that, go ahead. Argue with me about that. Tweet me at Chef the Left B on Twitter. Just remember what I told you exactly was going to happen last year. All year happened. So you can't always bash me for my positions, because 67% of the time I'm right.
Okay. I'm sure you're calculating that in real time. I'm going to have the last word because the great Dan Silver, you can reach on X at dsilver88. And the 88, of course, is for Eric Lindros. He is not here tonight, so I'm going to do a last word for him. And that is Emil Andrae can't come out of the lineup until he plays his way out of the lineup. And I don't care what that means for Yegor Zamula. Zamula's had a rough time out there. So I would be a choice between EJ, who they're already overplaying at, like, was he 36, 37 years old, or Zamula. And it's going to be interesting until Cam York gets back. And when Cam York does get back, that'll really get interesting. Andrae, so far, has earned the longest look because he's been more effective than a lot of guys that are playing right now. And like you talked about Nick Seeler coming back into form. We saw a lot of that last night. So there's some hope for the defense, because if Zamula's out and Andrae's in, that's an upgrade. Seeler's playing a little better. Sanheim's been their best guy so far. York will come back, and now it's starting to round into form. Not as good as last year, but there's some hope, and hopefully that'll have a domino effect and help the goaltending, because at least the puck will get out of the zone. That's, Yeah. So with that, we're going to wrap things up by reminding you that the O&B Puckcast is available on a dozen podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon Audible, Deezer, YouTube, Facebook. YouTube, just plug in there O&B Puckcast. We really appreciate it. If you could rate and subscribe and write a review, the next 5-star review we get, we'll read it on the show and we'll recognize you. And we do appreciate that very much. And all these things help move the O&B Puckcast up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And of course, we can be followed on X at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, on Getter at O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast. Sometimes we're a little salty there. And yeah, I think that's it. Folks, thanks for listening. Until next week, everybody, take care.